there's another component, if I may change focus slightly, and that is what I alluded to earlier, and that's the GLBT agenda, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transsexual. And it has nothing to do with preserving the rights, the dignity of any of these groups. This is just simply another power block that it's being exploited by the Rockefeller Foundation, Soros, and whoever else that gives them money, private corporations, you name it. It's a synthetically created, installed power block that's going to be, that already is in place, by the way. I've talked to other colleagues, and the upper level administration is already stocked with individuals like this. And the reason being is that if you criticize any aspect of the curriculum, any of the superstars within the university system, or even trivial points like banning smoking on the campus entirely, even in your own car, then automatically you become a homophobe. And no one wants to be stigmatized or labeled as being anti-human or homophobic or racist, whatever it is. So that's the second phase. The first part was with putting in a person of color in presidency and saying, oh, well, you can't criticize them, otherwise you're a racist. So the GLBT agenda is installed. It's very much an extension of what is referred to in this critical community as cultural Marxism. But again, cultural Marxism is an outdated phrase. It's fighting the last war. And just briefly, let me, like I did in the case of Rosaldo and Ong, identify 3 GLBT academic superstars that your viewers should be aware of. And they have had a huge, huge, huge impact on how the educated middle class, including its professionals, its attorneys, its physicians, its people in the sciences, they've had a huge impact, and there's very little discussion of these people in the larger society.
Professor, get into them. Yes. This is critical information. Great.
There's this one individual, her and him, because she goes by a dual gender identity. She goes by Jack/Judith Halberstam. She's at the University of Southern California, USC, or as we refer to it, the University of Spoiled Children. And she wrote a classic text called Female Masculinity, 1998. Talk about Baphomet, female masculinity. And she's talking about how gender roles are artificial, they're social constructions, and she lives her life and as a man/woman. If you want to look up her photos online, you can see what I mean. But so she's a key superstar. She has an endowed chair at the University of California. This is how they reward them. And again, this is nothing about being a transgender, transsexual, or being queer. It has nothing, very little to do with it. The second person is at the University of California, Berkeley. Her name's Judith Butler. She's famous for the incomprehensibility of her really arcane and abstruse writings, but her contribution is 1990. It's called Gender Trouble. And again, her attack is on these notions of man, of woman, of female, and male. This is the cultural assault on gender, on really on humanity, because they call it transhumanism or transsexualism, but it's really post-sexuality, post-humanism, where the state, after this point, takes control of reproduction and of sexuality in general.
And for those that don't know, just to back you up, I mean, Huxley, whose brother ran the UN program, was the founder of the transhumanist movement. You have the pop transhumanism that sounds nice, but internally, it's Brave New World. They pick your sex. You go into puberty when you're 5, you're a drone, you're programmed. So they use the civil rights movement saying, let's be nice to people that are naturally this way or have this proclivity, or are nice people, and let's hype it and then make it where people have to do what we want, because it's an engine pulling a whole political train that is a post-human world, and that's in all their text. They're not even hiding that, but then they know that the average person isn't aware of this. It's just like the chemicals in the food and water with the frogs, now having, quote, gender trouble. It's not that we're homophobic against gay frogs. They're not gay frogs, folks, like, some Romans were, one way or the other. The point is that's always gone on. It is an artificiality being projected for an end of humanity scenario. That's their words, not ours. And I know you've studied it, so get into it.
That's precisely it. I mean, it's interesting that you picked up on the biochemical and the science behind this, because they are doing, in the humanities and the social science, what they're doing is providing cover for the re-engineering of the human endowment, male and female, through biochemical re-engineering, through the BPA. You talk about it constantly in your program, and your guests speak to it, to these issues. But they're normalizing, through their teaching, they are normalizing this post-human transgender reality that is a part of a biological programming that was announced in public by people like Aldous Huxley. It comes from the same branch. This is the most recent bud, the green bud of this eugenics tree that has been growing and growing since the time, at least, of Huxley. The third person, okay, we have Judith Butler, we've just finished up with here. The third person in this triumvirate is Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick, deceased. She was at Duke University, which was one of the capitals of quote-unquote literary theory, which is part of this, by the way. Maybe I can get into this later on. There was something called theory with a capital T that was imported from Europe in order to, I think, neutralize any sort of political dissent or awareness that was coming out of the humanities, largely out of the anti-Vietnam War organization. So they brought in something from overseas, and Yale and places like Duke were instrumental in bringing this in. So her name is Sedgwick, deceased. She was at Duke University, made out of family tobacco money, the Duke fortune. And then she wound up at the Cooney Graduate Center, City University of New York. And she is one of the kingpins, or queenpins, rather, of queer theory. And her classic text was published in 1990, and the title there is The Epistemology of the Closet. Right, the epistemology, this is the philosophical underpinnings of what later became queer theory, which again is, they view it as a standalone, but really it's an adjunct to this larger eugenics re-engineering of the human species to move us into the post-human world. This is how it works. It's very subtle. It's incremental. It's part of this larger strategy of transformation. Of course, there'll be no resistance because there are no more men. And toward that end, I wanted to talk briefly about the Elliot Rodger situation. And out of respect to his family and to the victims, I won't go into the specifics of that scenario. I'm putting his name out there as being emblematic of what is happening at major institutions, as well as liberal arts colleges, community colleges all over the country. It's probably happening in Europe, Western Europe. It's happening in Japan. But you're seeing larger and larger numbers of male students who fit the Elliot Rodger prototype. They have severe gender confusion. Sometimes it's referred to as gender dysphoria. They're obsessed about it. They've been on psychotropics most of their life, and now they're being dosed heavily by these gender-bending hormones. And the university, instead of addressing these issues, because they manufacture these gender-bending hormones, because they are an adjunct of the pharmaceutical combine, they instead have put together university student services and counseling services to help serve as sort of the mission control therapeutic center to normalize this transformation. This is
all right, we'll be right back. Just like with breast cancer exploding because of the glyphosates, they make it about let's find a cure instead of finding out why it's exploding. They control the movement. Here's the bottom line. There is a public agenda to end human fertility and to reprogram the population in preparation to phase out most of the population. And there are arguments to reduce the population out there, and there's a lot of problems with humanity. But there's the artificiality of trying to make us failures so that we can be controlled and dealt with more easily and removed by an elite who I see as at the bottom of the barrel for humanity. And that's where I leave it. It's just that as the infertility spikes, next it'll be, why are you against people that have infertility? They're in their own group now, too. So I've seen how the very groups behind so much of this will then manage the crises they've helped create as the professor was just saying, and then they've dumbed the public down to just bleeding names like double plus good, where there's not even a discussion of anything. It's just, you're a racist, or you're a blah, blah, blah. While meanwhile, all the real racism and stuff gets ignored. It really is a dumbing down. It's very dangerous. We'll have to have you back again soon, Professor. We're almost out of time. Got 3 or 4 minutes. Go ahead and finish up. Put bookends on what you've said so far today, and I hope you'll come back and premiere your back-to-school special here in the next 2-3 weeks on air with us.
I'd love to come back and roll that one out for the benefit of the University of California. Yes, we're heading, in the name of queer theory and GLBT rights, which we all believe in, is sort of civil protections, right, for anybody, for any individual of any orientation. In that guise, though, what's happening is that the end game of post-sexuality is slowly being realized. This is the goal, as you have spoken to it in your own documentary, Endgame. This helps realize this dream of authoritarians from Plato all the way to Darwin, and that is elite control of human reproduction. So hopefully today I just gave you a little bit of insight, a little bit of behind-the-scenes insight on how this is orchestrated in the academic curriculum and how generations of educated Americans and Western Europeans and overseas as well are being infused with this New World Order humanistic outlook, which is really anti-human.
What do your colleagues say? Because, I mean, they're smart. They all know this stuff's in the mainline literature. At the technocrat level, it's not hidden. I mean, what do they say to you?
When they speak to me, they look at me askance, and I think that most of my opposition comes from my immediate colleagues, because they've been bought off into it. They're smart, intelligent people, but like any other institution, the reigning operational philosophy is go along to get along. And this is true for academia, which is ironic, because supposedly we're here in order to blaze new trails and come up with new insights and information so that we could help move our civilization a little bit further along here. But it doesn't work that way in practice. Well, there's the paradox. They're in their ivory towers, scared of you, but out in the open, what you're saying, really people have been supportive. And so I think that's what the disconnect is. I don't think this overall program is going to go the way the technocrats thought. I don't believe so. And that's why I'm going outside the tower. I'm going over their heads and going directly to the public. And I thank you for the opportunity to reach such large numbers of people, because this is how we are going to erode the foundations of this artificial ivory tower of Babel that has been erected. It's very, very vulnerable, and I'd like to leave on an optimistic note. The educated middle class historically around the world has never been larger, and that's why their control system, their snoop systems, their IT, the NSA, that's why they're going to fail, because our intelligence and our will is far, far greater than theirs. And that's not hype or a pep talk. It's true. That's why they're trying to move so quick right now, because they know they're in trouble. The human desire for true freedom is much stronger than their desire to control and dominate us. Professor, thank you so much for the time. Professor Hamamoto, I'm coming back in overdrive. Thank you to talk to Darlene, James, and Dennis. I appreciate you guys holding. Apologize to the other callers. I'll get to those three. Stay with us, Infowars.com. All right, we line up guests, and most talk shows would just hang up on the callers when the guest comes on, but I let folks hold if they want to stay with us to talk. So I kind of apologize, but also say, hey, I'm doing you a favor. My point is I don't like making people hold, but I do. Darlene, thanks for holding from Canada. Then we'll go to Dennis and James. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex. I've been listening to you for 8 years, and I believe they're going to let the border crisis get so bad that's when they'll introduce the UN troops on Americans. And
well, the UN's already down there actually calling the shots. We have an article about that yesterday. So, no, I mean, I think this is just part of the process. I think you're right.
And it's going to be bad. So probably by the spring, all hell's going to break loose. Thank you for everything you do, and God bless.
Well, God bless you, sweetheart, for holding. What a sweet lady. Let's talk to James in Colorado. You're on the air.
Hey, Alex. James, also a longtime listener. I'm also a Libertarian Party endorsed candidate for Colorado State House Representative District 45.
Awesome.
So I'd just like to briefly comment about the gun control issues going on in Colorado and the National Guard sent to Texas border by Governor Perry.
Go ahead.
In response for gun control in Colorado, getting better, a lot better, outside of the Denver metro area, at least. The city that I live in, Castle Rock, their city council just recently voted to remove the ban on open carry in all public government buildings and city council meetings. If you remember, almost half of the city council said they were going to resign if the ban was removed. Well, they're all still there.
Well, I know this. We need to continue to move against all those legislators with recalls that voted for the gun ban.
Exactly. Also, in regards to the National Guards sent down to the Texas border by Governor Perry, what Perry needs to do is give the National Guards orders not to allow the feds to be even in the area that they're actively patrolling and guarding. Since they're being deployed by the governor himself, it's not a war activity. So the federal government and their federal agencies have zero authority to do anything. What needs to happen is Governor Perry and the Texas Guard need to restrain and just ignore any requests by these feds and federal agencies.
I know, but the Mexican government won't take the people back, so we can't just stick everybody in a prison camp indefinitely. You've got to have a way to deport them. So it's a very complex issue. It's the federal government has the jurisdiction to do this. This is one of the few things they're supposed to do. So, of course, they're not doing it. And you can't blame the Border Patrol. They've been ordered to stand down. I mean, they should speak up more, but they are speaking up. I appreciate your call. Interesting points, James. Dennis in Texas, you're our tail gunner. Go ahead.
Yeah, what basically I wanted to speak about was something that I think is very much overlooked, and that is basically how much the church is involved in what's going on.
Oh, yeah, they're 501c3, faith-based initiative. First they made them anti-terror police, where the preacher watches their flock. Now Baptist churches, Catholic, you name it, they're the ones running the end of the country.
Yes, the Council of Churches. But the thing is the majority of the people coming out of Mexico and Central America is primarily Catholic.
Yep.
And the fact that the Pope, and Obama met just before all this was rolled out, is that a coincidence? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I know that the Catholic Church has a lot of constituents south of the border. I know the Catholic Church, depending on which branch of it, which bishop it is, are involved in this heavily. But it's being directed by the federal government. And we can blame the Catholic Church if we want to. I think pressure should be put on them. But it's being directed by the 501c3, which was unconstitutional, that grew into clergy response teams, that's illegal, that's now grown into open federal funding of churches through faith-based initiatives that started under George Bush that the Democrats just love. Whatever happened to the First Amendment, it went out the window.